I'm Dr. SCL. I'm a dad, a chiropractor, and the translator you didn't know you needed in this, the first year of parenting. This is Decoded, the first year, the podcast that turns baby brain confusion, mum burnout, and milestone panic into clarity you can actually use. Let's make sense of the chaos by decoding it together. You've probably heard the phrase, regulated parents raise regulated children. And if you're anything like the parents that I see in my practice, you've heard that and felt one of two things, either guilt or confusion. Guilt because you're exhausted and you know it. Confusion because nobody actually explains why that is true. They just say it and they leave you with the pressure of it without giving you the neuroscience underneath. Today, we're going to fix that because this is not a conversation about parenting better. This is a conversation about how development actually works at a nervous system level and why your state, your child's state, and the space between you matters more than almost anything else in early childhood. This is possibly one of the most important episodes that I've dived into. So let's get cracking. Here is what most people misunderstand about child development. They think of it as something that happens inside the child alone. Milestones, skills, language, motor control, cognitive leaps, as if development is a program running quietly in the background. And your job as the parent is simply not to interfere with it. And based on last episode's conversation about the external pressures parents face when it comes to their child's development, this statement sounds plausible. But that model is incomplete, and the neuroscience has known that it's been incomplete for decades. Development is not a solo process. It is a relational process. It requires an external nervous system, a regulated, available, responsive nervous system, to act as the scaffolding upon which the child's own system learns to organize itself. Without that scaffolding, development doesn't just slow down. In some domains, it cannot proceed at all. That is not a parenting opinion. That is developmental neuroscience. And it changes everything about how we understand what children actually need. So let's start with the mechanism. A child's nervous system is not self-sufficient at birth. The part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, executive function, and impulse control and decision-making is the last structure to fully develop. We're talking well into the mid-20s for full maturation. So in early childhood, the child has almost no independent capacity to regulate. What they have instead is what is called co-regulation. Now, co-regulation is the process by which one nervous system stabilizes another. It happens through proximity, voice tone, breathing rhythm, touch, predictability, facial expression. When a caregiver is regulated, they're calm, available, present, their nervous system literally transmits that state to their child's nervous system through these channels. This is not just a metaphor, this is measurable. Research in developmental neuroscience shows that a caregiver's heart rate variability, their vocal tone and rhythm, and their cortisol patterns, these all directly influence their child's physiological state in real time. Now, here's the part that matters most. Development, that is optimal development, can only occur when the nervous system is in a regulated state. Think of it this way. The nervous system has a hierarchy of priority. At the top is survival. When the nervous system detects threat, whether that's physical, emotional, unpredictable, or chronic stress, It mobilizes every available resource towards protection. Heart rate increases, cortisol rises, attention narrows, the body prepares to fight, or freeze. In that state, learning stops, language acquisition slows, social development is interrupted, fine motor development stalls, not because the child is being difficult, but because the brain has correctly determined that right now, survival matters more than development. Regulation, then, is not a nice extra or nice to have. It is the precondition for development to occur. And because children cannot produce regulation independently, they depend entirely on borrowing it from the nervous system around them. The state of the caregiving environment becomes the single most powerful variable in whether development can proceed. This is what the phrase regulated parents raising regulated children actually means. It's not a moral statement, it's a biological one. The child's nervous system cannot do what your nervous system hasn't modelled yet. Now, I want to give you two pictures of how this plays out in practice. The first, a child who presents as globally delayed across multiple developmental domains. Their language is behind, fine motor control is behind, social engagement is inconsistent, they have fragmented sleep and dysregulated feeding. And when we look at the caregiving environment, not in any intention to assign blame, but to understand the background, we will find a parent who is genuinely stretched beyond capacity. They'll be stressed, isolated, dysregulated themselves. Now, firstly, one can ask about a chicken or egg here. In other words, which nervous system was dysregulated first, thereby dragging the other into the same state? This is certainly an example of where family-focused approach has the greatest impact. One can work with the child and definitely achieve some results, but the greatest results will be found in a regulated family and home. It's about stabilizing the caregiving nervous system first, because until that scaffolding is available, the child has nowhere to borrow regulation from. When the parent's capacity improves, the child's developmental trajectory often shifts with it. Not always, but frequently enough that it tells us something important. And in some cases, and I know in my own household we can vouch for this is where a pet can also play a massive role. We sadly lost our beloved dog a few months ago. He wasn't even 4. But he had grown up alongside my son. They were playmates. And as a result, there is no doubt they regulated each other. And initially after his passing, my son definitely found it hard to regulate himself. His behaviour went off, and as a result, our parenting became even more difficult. Now, with time, we all found our rhythm again, but in times of stress, it has been more challenging. At the time of recording this podcast, we now have had a new puppy for just over a week. And the change has been palpable. Even though our new puppy is still learning about his new home, my son has been engaged in his arrival, and therefore he has been more regulated. The second picture to paint is the child from a calm, predictable, responsive caregiving environment who is consistently meeting or exceeding developmental expectations. Not because of formal interventions or structured programs, but because their nervous system has been held in a regulated state long enough to do the work development requires. Now, I appreciate how idealistic this second state sounds. Almost as good as the internet says all of our parenting should be 100% of the time. The point is, our children borrow their regulation from our nervous systems. Hence, what are we as parents doing to help ourselves in order to help our kids? Again, that's another podcast in itself. But here we have two children, different trajectories, And the difference is not genetics. It's not programs. It's not therapies. It's the relational environment, the quality of the nervous system scaffolding, and that shapes what is possible. So what does this mean practically? It means that the most developmental thing you can do for your child is not a program, a toy, a curriculum, or a therapy. It's your presence, your regulation, and your availability. That doesn't mean perfection. Regulated does not mean never stressed. It means returning to regulation consistently enough that your nervous system remains a reliable source for co-regulating your child. The capacity is to recover, repair, reconnect, and restabilize, not a constant state of calm. It also means that when development feels stuck, when milestones are delayed, when behavior is dysregulated, and when sleep and feeding and engagement all feel off, the first question is never, what is wrong with my child? The first question should always be, what is the nervous system environment my child is developing inside of? Because the nervous system doesn't develop in isolation. It develops in relationship, always. If you want to understand exactly what milestones sit behind a regulatory development state and how to track whether your child's system is getting the co-regulation it needs, the Baby Milestone Decoder maps this out clearly across the first 12 months. Send me a DM at Mount Hawthorn Chiropractic and I'll send you a copy. Until next time, trust your instincts, watch the patterns, and remember, strong foundations are usually built quietly, and in this case, that's done together. Dr. SCL, out. Thanks for listening to Decoded, the first year, where we translate the mess of early parenting into something that actually makes sense. Be sure to share this episode with a friend, a partner, or a mum that you know who is quietly struggling through the noise and secretly Googling every milestone. If you want to hear more decoding, follow at Mount Hawthorn Chiropractic on the socials. Let's keep decoding the chaos. No mansplaining, no pressure, no judgment, just clarity when you need it most. Please note, this podcast isn't medical advice. It's just smart strategies from a Gonstead chiropractor, a dad, and someone who's been in the room with hundreds of mums trying to make sense of their baby's development, their own postpartum recovery, and the constant noise that comes with modern parenting. Always chat with your health team for specific care.